I failed at trading for almost 2 years. I was watching videos every day, backtesting for hours, constantly trying to figure out what I was still missing. And then one day, something clicked. The way I traded completely changed forever, and I eventually became consistently profitable, which sounds ridiculous, because what can possibly change in one day after failing for 2 years? See, the problem was never that I wasn't working hard enough. If anything, I was doing too much. I would learn a strategy, backtest it, and feel like I finally found something. Then I would have a bad week, and suddenly one of the rules didn't make sense anymore. So I changed it. Then the new version would work for a while. Until that version had a losing period too. So after almost 2 years, I had watched thousands of hours of content. I had backtested more strategies than I could probably remember. But I still couldn't confidently answer one simple question. What exactly do I trade? I had a rough idea, then a lot of exceptions around it. If the setup looked really clean, maybe I could enter a bit earlier. If the market looked strange, maybe I should skip it. And every exception felt intelligent in the moment. But after enough exceptions, there was no strategy left, which is probably why I could backtest something profitably, then trade completely differently live. And every time the live results were bad, I blamed the strategy I wasn't even following. So I went back to learning. Other video, other idea. And that kept me busy enough to feel like I was getting closer. But I wasn't building experience in one thing. I was repeatedly becoming a beginner at something new. That was the actual 2 years. And by the end of it, I knew enough to become profitable. The problem was that I still thought knowing more was the answer. Until one day, I finally saw what all that learning was actually doing to me. So this day, I was going through my trades again, trying to understand why something that looked so good on backtest kept falling apart when I traded live. And at first, I did what I always did. I looked for the mistake in the strategy. Maybe the entry needed to be more precise. Maybe one of the conditions were too loose. But the longer I looked at the trades, the less it made sense, because almost every decision had an explanation behind it. If I entered, I could explain why the setup was valid. If I skipped it, I could explain why something looked wrong. And both explanations sound smart. And that was the problem. I had learned so many different concepts that there was something on the chart supporting whatever I already felt like doing. And once I noticed that, I started looking back through more of the trades. Not to see whether they won or lost, just to see whether I was actually making the same decision every time. And honestly, I wasn't. And that was a strange thing to realize after almost 2 years, because I had spent all the time trying to understand the market better. But now I couldn't even tell whether two trades belong to the same strategy. So for the first time, I stopped asking what else I need to learn. And I started wondering whether learning more was actually the thing that kept me stuck. Because if all of that knowledge allowed me to justify almost any decision, then what exactly I was backtesting? And what exactly was I trading live? And once I saw that, I never looked at trading the same way again. My first instinct was still to fix it with knowledge. If my decisions were inconsistent, then obviously I needed better rules around them. So I tried writing everything down, every condition, every exception, every scenario I could think of. And it did nothing, because the problem was never that the rules weren't written. The problem was that I had enough material to build an argument for anything. Then I tried opposite. I told myself I would follow the strategy exactly as it was, no changes for 3 months. I had made that promise before. It lasted about 3 weeks, because the moment the losing streak arrived, the rules were still open for interpretation. So nothing I did could fix it, which only left one direction. I stripped away most of what I learned, not because all of it was useless, but because every extra concept gave me other decision to make while the trade was happening. So I went back to something much simpler. One setup built around market structure and Fibonacci, clear enough that I could look at the trade afterward and know whether it belonged to the strategy or not. There was no technically it was valid. Either the setup was there or it wasn't. The strategy had around 40% win rate, which means 6 losses in a row was expected. And before that day, I never really accepted that. I understood it mathematically, yes, sure. But the moment a few losses happened live, I still started looking for something to fix. Now there was nothing to fix after one loss. And honestly, that was probably the first time I had a strategy instead of just a collection of trading ideas. And no, I didn't suddenly make huge amount of money the next morning. But from that day, I stopped restarting. And the strange part is, Most traders have already promised themselves they will stick to one strategy. So deciding to keep it simple was not enough by itself. The real test came when the strategy started losing again. And of course the strategy did start losing again. It had to. But this time, I didn't treat the losing streak as new information. Before 3 or 4 losses would send me straight back to the charts. I would have looked for the one thing those trades had in common, then build a new rule around it. But now I already knew what the strategy was supposed to look like. And more importantly, I knew what losing with it was supposed to look like. And this is where the backtesting finally became useful. Not because it guaranteed that the next trade would win. It gave me a reference for what normal looked like. And that removed most of the panic, because before, every losing period felt new. And this is the worst part. I had no idea whether I was seeing normal variance or the beginning of another fast strategy. But now I could actually compare it to something. And for the first time, I wasn't relying on confidence. Confidence disappears quickly when the account is going down. I was relying on evidence. And by the way, that made reviewing trades much simpler too. I stopped asking, why did this lose? Because a body trade doesn't need a special explanation for losing. Sometimes it just loses. Most of the time it just loses. The useful question became, did I take the trade exactly the way I tested it? If the answer was yes, there was nothing to fix. If the answer was no, then the problem was visible. And that distinction changed everything. Because before, my strategy and my execution were mixing together. Every loss made both of them look guilty. But now I could finally separate them. The edge could have a bad week without me redesigning it. And I could make an execution mistake without pretending a strategy needed another rule. This is why this time it actually lasted, not because I made some stronger promise to myself. I had made those promises before. It lasted because the losses finally had a place to go. But there is still one important difference between the day everything clicked and the day I could actually call myself consistently profitable. Because after I made the change, nothing about the market suddenly became easier. I still had losing trades. I still had bad weeks. So the account did not just shoot straight up. It was more boring than that. I took the same setup again, then again. And slowly, the live results started looking more like the data I already had. That was the first time trading stopped feeling random to me. Not because I knew what the next trade would do, but I finally knew what I was supposed to do, regardless of the outcome. The first profitable month felt good, but honestly, 1 month did not prove much. I had good months before. The difference was what happened after it. I did not increase the risk because I finally made it. And when the next losing period came, I did not rebuild the strategy again. I just kept trading. This is when it started becoming obvious that this was not another lucky period, because the consistency was no longer inside the results. It was inside the decisions. And the results eventually followed. So yes, it took me almost 2 years to become profitable, but the actual shift happened in 1 day. I stopped trying to learn my way out of every losing period, and I finally gave one simple strategy enough time to show me what it could do. The money came later, but looking back, that was the day the failure stopped. And if you've been stuck for years, there is a high chance you do not need another strategy. The real question is whether the setup you trade today is still going to be the same setup 300 trades from now. Because if the answer is no, the next 2 years can look exactly like the last 2. But if the answer is yes, you might be much closer than you think.